Welcome to a podcast from the Phoenix Esoteric Society. We hope you enjoy today's topic.
Okay, before I get into things this week, I have an Occult Science and Magic in Today's Technological World course available. Courses page, click on that, you can get right over to that. Also, I have a Chasing Infinity, Sacred Geometry, and the Balance of Life talk that I did in some Masonic lodges. Sacred Geometry, it's awesome. Also, I have one called The Master Alchemist, Rosicrucianism, and Freemasonry. If you're interested in alchemy, Rosicrucianism, Freemasonry, great course. Definitely want to listen to that. It even includes 3 free books with it. So this is all awesome. So go to my courses. These courses also support Phoenix Esoteric Society. So I'm giving you great information that's life-changing that can help you and everyone that you know in your vicinity and around you in the world. Not only that, but you can also help support Phoenix Esoteric Society as well when you purchase one of these courses. Everything is listed on Gumroad, and it's absolutely, your purchase is safe on Gumroad. Don't forget to use Tree of Life as a code, and you will get $3 off everything there. Tree of Life. All right, let's get into it this week. So this podcast is about, in response to a video by Rebel Wisdom called NPC, Meme, and Simulated Thinking. And I'm doing this because these are subjects I was just talking about. And then now I saw this video on the subject, so I thought I'd listen to that and then comment on it based upon my own thinking about these two subjects of NPC, Meme, and Simulated Thinking. All right, one of the things right off that I think is interesting about the video is that when they're talking about NPC meme or NPC, they start talking about NPC thinking, like simulated thinking, right? Like an NPC. So one of the first things I like right off is the fact that when they're talking about an NPC non-player character, they haven't gotten into that yet, but they're talking about thinking. Like where the thinking of what could be defined as a non-player character would come from, and what that simulated thinking, and they call it simulated thinking, what that would look like. So I think that's interesting right from the very beginning, because I haven't really ever gotten into, like, I've talked about how NPCs are programmed to think a certain way, but not how that simulated thinking actually works. All right, the thing they talk about, how this idea has kind of gotten under people's skin, is the fact that it's perceived as an NPC with simulated thinking has no free will, that there's no free will behind thought. In fact, I think they're going to get into this, but in fact there is no thought. The thought is just something that's simulated. It's a program, that this is operating on a program. I don't know, but I'll talk about that a little bit more as a whole in a moment, listening to more of this, but you know, about 90% of the time we operate on an unconscious that is based upon our belief system, and usually our belief system and what we learned as kids, and over 90% of the time, every day when we go out there in the world, we're running that program. We're looking at things and judging things and taking in data and emotionally responding a lot of times to that data, to those memes, to those symbols, whether it be words or it could be a meme, it could be a picture, it could be a movie, it could be a video. No matter what it is, it's stimulating us and we're emotionally reacting to it. So, I mean, if you look at the mainstream media right now, like the news, these different news channels, they're basically scripted to run programs to a certain political ideology or point of view, either on a far left or far right side, right? That's basically what they're doing, and it's obvious that they're doing, although they say that they don't, and that's why people get into this fake news or whatever. But think of that term, fake news, right? Because is news real news? You know, it's always been real gloom and doom news. You know, the worse it was, the more newsworthy it was. It still is that way. But the more gloom and doom news has been replaced with the more politically spun, has an agenda news, which people then turn fake news because that means it's fake, it's being created to establish a response, right? And so are the people that are doing that and putting out that news to establish a one-sided response, are they basically NPCs, non-playing characters? Absolutely. Because they're predicted to script out this propagandic, they're scripted to give out propaganda and to make it one-sided. That's all they do. Now, you could say, well, they have free will because they don't have to do that. The only reason they're doing that is because they work for this news agency and they're getting paid a lot of money to do that. And if they decide not to do that anymore, they're not going to get that paycheck anymore from that company to be able to do that, which makes no sense because if they're popular enough and they have a following, there's people doing news on YouTube that are making a hell of a lot more money and being seen by more people than some of the people in the mainstream news shows. So you have to ask yourself, since that is the case, and you, with the money you have accumulated and have, could easily do that, are you in fact just an NPC that's writing a script when you have other options? You know, that's something to think about. You know, something really interesting is that what we're seeing today in the world, where we'll see like mostly young people, like say on the left, but what they'll do is they'll all stand up together in unity, and then they'll all start at the same time saying the same thing over and over and over and over in unity, right? And it looks just like a machine. Like you're programmed with that slogan, whatever it is. And you're all programmed to stand at the same time, and then when someone says something you don't like, just repeat that slogan over and over and over and over and over, right? It's like a machine. I mean, wouldn't that be more like a NPC, machine-related consciousness? Even though it's being divisive and it's trying to shut someone else or another opinion down that it disagrees with, it still seems to be very machine-like, right? That it just repeats the same thing over and over and over and over, right? And it needs this herd or group of other people to do the same thing, to all repeat this thing over and over for its own sense of safety, for that person's own NPC sense of safety within a group, right? How many players are in that group sleeping with the NPCs too? That's something to think about. But my idea of an NPC is the same as theirs, is that it's a player in this game, but does that player really truly have the freedom to think on their own without all of the bugs and viruses and crap that is polluting their mind from all these different sources, which is including the media, other people, the way they were raised, all these different things. So I don't think people have as much freedom of thought and even freedom in the mind as they think that they do. You know, and listening to my programs are going to find out they have even less, but that's something that can be fixed. But anyways, I think NPCs, because I think this is all a simulation, are actually people that are in the simulation to play a role. And they don't really exist as far as like people, but again, too, who's an NPC and who's a person, a player in the game. I mean, it's so hard to tell, you don't know. Because there's a lot of sleeping players too. So that's my definition of this. And it's obviously different from what they're talking about, but what I think they're talking about is interesting as well. Yeah, and then they put out this film called Glitch in the Matrix with Jordan Peterson. He's having this interview with this I forget her name, this female or woman journalist, and she's trying to compete with him and shred him, and he just shreds her, and that's what he got famous for. And what they're saying is that basically she was an NPC because she was programmed to ask certain questions and to stay on topic and to stay within the boundaries of her one-sided political view and her one-sided view of things, which she did perfectly. But by doing that, it sounded very scripted, and he was able to pull it apart by being unscripted, right, during the interview, which is interesting. And I'll put a link to that as well, and maybe at some point watch that and talk about it. But I'm not a big, huge Jordan Peterson fan, someone who watches Jordan Peterson. But I think in the context of what they're talking about, how he went up unscripted against somebody who was completely scripted and was able to win an argument because they couldn't unscript themselves during the conversation. I think it'd be interesting to watch that. Okay, so I like in here where the guy's calling it habit thinking. You're thinking not because of thinking, but you're thinking based upon your habitual experiences, based upon habit. I like to call it belief thinking. Yeah, it's habitual. It's a habit, but you've had the habit for so long, it's become a belief. And no matter what it is, you just believe something is true. So you are now programmed basically to, if anyone confronts you and you in any way sense something they've said or the way they look or what they're doing is in fact contradictory, is a contradiction to what you believe, what you think is true, you know, automatically people are going to get, especially right now, they're going to get very defensive. And all their defense mechanisms are going to come up. And at that point, they're going to stick to their scripted thinking. And then they're not talking about this, but in psychology, there's cognitive dissonance. And cognitive dissonance means that the mind cannot hold two opposing views at the same time, or it becomes too stressed out. So even for a person who believes one thing, to in their mind at the same time they believe one thing strongly, to try and believe something else, it's extremely stressful for the mind. It doesn't work that way. And it doesn't allow the mind then to actually concentrate onto completely different and opposite things at the same time because of the stress that it causes the mind. But, you know, we have found, and a lot of the stuff I talk about in these esoteric and occult courses are the fact that you can train your mind to have two contradictory statements and beliefs at the same time without it stressing out the mind. And that actually is the way to really understanding yourself, you know, and being able to understand things in life and not just being one-sided and taking a side, because that is like a script. Again, you're programmed. You're being programmed by something. Someone told you something that you looked up to. You read something in a book by someone that you thought, you know, was an authority on a subject. You went to some type of meeting, whatever it is. You've given your authority away to someone or something else, and now you're being scripted by that person because you're believing what they told you, right? And isn't that what most human beings do, right? So I'll say most of us are scripted, but the difference is the NPC has a very narrow script. It's like the NPC is just like, actually like artificial intelligence. Narrow AI has a very narrow script of what it needs to stay on and can't come off of it. And how many times have we talked to someone, you talk to someone, who they babble. So just think in your life, too, how many times that you've went up and just talked to some stranger, you went up and talked to someone, and they just gave you some canned-ass answer, some babble to you, right? And you look at them and you think, well, that was odd. But they just gave you some canned, straight answer or something. Or even it's something that was off-topic and kind of strange. That happens a lot. You see a lot of malfunctions in NPCs, non-player characters do that. Because some of them aren't, really ready to be responsive to you in any type of emotional or interesting or even humorous way. Sometimes they're just, they were just supposed to be part of the scenery, and I happen to talk to one who happens to be programmed to be part of the scenery, but since they're also programmed to respond to me, they do, but in a very strange way. I mean, it just proves it right there, and I think everyone's had those conversations with those kinds of people. Well, the other thing, too, with simulated thinking is it's not thinking. Because you just put yourself in autopilot. You believe something, and then you just go into autopilot, and you don't have to think. And a lot of people today want, we've talked to someone recently. A lot of people today want the internet to think for them. They want the internet, they want their phone to tell them what to do. They want the internet to think for them and put up the stuff that they want to watch or they're interested in, or their phone to keep telling them what they should do and what they should pay attention to and keep sending them things. A lot of people would love that. They would love for technology to think for them. I've talked in one of my courses about what a really bad idea I think that is. But there's a lot of people that want technology to think for them. But the fact is, NPC is a very narrow thinking, non-player character. But again, there are some people who are not NPCs, who are players in this world, in this game of life, who in the simulation, who are acting like NPCs and have a very narrow level of thinking, if at all, programming, let's say, just because they have chosen that. They're just like the person who's going to give up and just let technology make their decisions for them. They've done the same thing in life. And so what they do is just allow their, whatever they've been programmed with, whatever religious or philosophical or ideological thing they've been, no matter how absurd it is, been taught to believe, they've just decided to believe it, and that runs their entire operating system on a very narrow scope, because a lot of those times, especially the things I mentioned, they're not going to be open to anything else. Watch the video, NPC Meme and Simulated Thinking. Again, I come from more of the simulated life view, and that certain things are here and happen for certain reasons, including NPCs, non-player characters. And are they people? Yeah, but they're not actually players, and I define that more in one of my courses. Yeah, this is something I'll get into more and more, but I just, I think this whole NPC simulated thinking idea, especially if you're starting to wake up and you're saying to yourself, well, why do I believe the things that I believe and think the way that I do? Is it based upon direct experiences that I've had in my life? And when you really look at that and say, no, I've never really had this direct experience of this thing in my life called God or whatever, to where I can completely, totally believe it's true. That's not saying you can't have that experience. You should. And the other thing is, you can look back and see that you've had experiences in your life that you're choosing to hang on to that are these negative or looked at as negative programs that you've chosen to hold on to so that you can keep that virus and that malfunctioning running in your life and disrupting your life, because you always keep relying on that malfunction or virus from your past that you could easily remove and recode and get out of your life, but for some reason you keep it, and it keeps coming back up, and it's messing up this thing that you have called life in this simulation. So check out this video. The other one that they're talking about with Jordan Peterson, again, I'm not the biggest Jordan Peterson fan or anything like that. I don't really follow the things he's saying a whole lot. It's not my thing, but I'll check that out as well and put this in here. And I think this is some great discussion material about NPC Meme and simulated thinking. So thanks for joining me. I really, really appreciate your participation in this podcast by checking out the source material like this video that I'm talking about, checking out this other stuff. Turn on the Phoenix Esoteric Society podcast to others as well. Tell other people about this. Send them to the website. Send them this podcast, and you can download it and listen to it whenever you want. I really appreciate that. Thank you.